Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the March 24th, 2026 Littleton Conservation Commission meeting, and would like to go ahead and start this evening with the approval of minutes from March 3rd, 2026. Commissioners, does anyone have any amendments that or suggestions they'd like to make for March 3rd, 2026? Any edits?
Just had a couple of very minor ones. Under the Reed Roberts Scout Project review, about a quarter of the way down, it says Mr. Roberts hopes to complete fundraising in April. It just has a little apostrophe after Roberts in this case. Jumping down to CPC applications update, it just says Mr. Pearson informs the commission that the applications for terrestrial invasive control and aquatic invasive control, should it be invasives control? And then on the very back, under public hearing 17 Worcester, at the very end, it says an alternative system would, an alternative system would have larger vertical constraints that would require additional grading, changing to parking. I just crossed it to put changes to parking.
Okay.
And that's all I had.
Okay, great. Anyone else have any other edits? Okay, if not, go ahead. Sorry.
I'll move to approve the minutes as amended for March 3rd, 2026.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Andrew?
Roll call vote. All right. Ed.
Ed Foltz, aye.
Carl.
Tom Albert, aye.
Kyle.
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Michael.
Michael Livingston, aye.
Chase.
Chase Carabeg, aye.
Sarah.
Sarah Seward, aye.
Myself, aye. It's unanimous.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, let's jump down to administrative discussions. Does anyone have anything they would like to add to discussion items? Okay, if not, let's jump right in. First is the land use permit request from Littleton Volunteer Corps Training at Prouty Woods. Tim, do you want to fill us in on that?
Yeah, so Alex
McCurdy, you did receive the paperwork in your packet.
Yep. So Alex McCurdy was the one that submitted this, and unfortunately he can't make it tonight, but he was hoping to get approval without his attendance. So as you guys saw, it's for a search and rescue training over at Prouty. And I don't know if you guys had any questions, any concerns. Hopefully I can maybe address some of the questions if you have them. I didn't get to speak with Alex for too long about this.
Yeah, Tim, I was wondering if we even have to issue a permit in this case, because I know that, Beth Gula had mentioned to me a couple weeks ago that they had already given approval to LVC to go out to Prouty and do this. And since it's NEF land, do we have jurisdiction to issue a permit?
So, and I actually looked into that, Andrew, because that was my first reaction too. And I actually directed Alex to Beth because I wanted at least their approval. And then I have gone back and looked in our land use permits, and we have issued land use permits at Prouty before. So I thought, out of an abundance of caution, might as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because we've done the orienteering ones there, right? And now that you say, I never even thought about that being NEF property, Andrew, when we have given these permits before, but we definitely have approved permits in Prouty.
But that's a good point, Andrew. They do have NEF approval. Yeah.
Because I'm just thinking too, like down the road, that kind of be like us saying, you know, you can go and do this on Conservation Trust property. You know what I mean?
Okay. With that said, does anybody else have any other questions or comments? Okay, Tim, what would you like from us this evening?
Might as well vote. Why not?
Okay, with that said, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that the commission approve the land use permit for Prouty Woods for the Littleton Volunteer Corps training on the dates requested.
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Carl.
Tom Albert, aye.
Ed.
Ed Foltz, aye.
Kyle.
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Michael.
Michael Livingston, aye.
Chase.
Chase Carabeg, aye.
Sarah.
Sarah Seward, aye.
Myself, aye. It's unanimous.
Okay, great. Thank you. Moving along, discussion enforcement order 359 King Street. I see that Dwight Long is here and Joe Cataldo as well. Tim, you want to move them over?
Yep, I'm moving them over right now.
Okay. In your packets, you did receive some revised plans for that. Tim, do you want to share screen, or Dwight, would you like to share the screen? What would you like to do?
We have Regan here as well.
Yes.
If you want to share your screen, if not, I
Sure.
can always do it.
Either
Okay.
one, whatever's easier for you.
Fantastic.
So.
Just as a point of order, Dwight, you are muted, just so you know.
Regan, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Sure. Okay.
There you go.
Let's get it up
Thank
there.
you, Sarah.
Yep.
All right. Hold on. Let me get this full screen for you.
And then Regan, can you just go ahead and introduce yourself to the commission as well? Thank you.
I will, absolutely. Let me just do this full screen first before I share my screen. Okay, give me 1 second. There we go. Okay. Give me 1 second. Share screen. No, give me just a sec. Doesn't wanna. Working on a little screen right now. Here we go. Got it. Okay. Everyone see this? Trying to make it as big as possible.
That's it.
Okay, great, wonderful. All right, so good evening, everyone. My name is Regan Andriola. I am a registered landscape architect and senior project manager with Weston Sampson here on behalf of the property owner, Dwight Long. So we're here to share a restoration planting plan that we've prepared. I don't know, do you want me to just jump right in?
I think what would be helpful, Regan, is to go of where we were prior, and then appreciate the time that you've worked with myself and Lauren and Tim kind of going through some suggested edits. So maybe just kind of do a quick recap of where we were and where you are now.
Sure. Yeah, so about a month ago, we had prepared a restoration plan. As we know, there was 43 trees within conservation jurisdiction that were removed. So we had prepared a plan that was 1.5 to 1 replacement on the trees. And then I think we had a 4 to 1 on shrubs because the property owner was interested in adding an understory shrub layer to this. So we had shared that with yourself, Sarah and Tim, and we had talked about the fact that it didn't feel like that ratio was necessarily high enough on the tree replacement, as well as thinking, it looked like some of the plants were a little bit more lined up along the kind of Page South wetland line here, if you can see my my cursor. So we took another go at it, and what we did was really enhance the plan to do a 3 to 1 ratio of the trees, and then we scaled back the shrubs. We still wanted to include some layer of shrubs in there just for some added habitat value, but we wanted the focus to be on the trees. So that's that was really the change that was made, as well as trying to kind of stagger the trees more along the southern side here. It's really the western side, I suppose, but Page South. So they had been a little bit more lined up, and we tried to kind of mix them up and group them and stagger them more, but we are trying to keep them somewhat close to the edge of the existing tree line and wetland line in order to keep some amount of open space in the middle for more of this is an agricultural farmland and future pasture for horses. So that was part of the reasoning of clustering the trees a little bit closer to the edge, but we did still stagger them and mix it up so it wasn't like a line or a hedge of, a single species. I can kind of, from there, if you're okay with that, I can dive into more of the details of the species and what we're focusing on.
Commissioners, what would you like?
That sounds great.
Okay. So obviously all that was removed there before was, I believe they were all red maples that were, many of which were in poor health. So as we were selecting new trees to go out here, we've mixed a whole bunch of species. That's obviously kind of preferred when you're doing a big mass planting plan. You don't want a single monoculture in case something wipes it out. Also, red maples are toxic to horses. So if there are horses in the near future grazing out here, we wanted to make sure that we were doing all species that would be non-toxic to horses, as well as native, and really kind of providing a variety and more biodiversity really to the property. So we have serviceberry, a clump serviceberry. That is a tree that can get 20, 25 feet tall and wide, so a little bit more mass that way versus full height. River birch, flowering dogwood, eastern red cedar, tulip poplar, tupelo, white pine, and American sycamore. So a really diverse mix of trees that are all native, and again, non-toxic to animals, horses, and would all be suitable for this particular environment. We did add in, like I said, a few evergreens in addition to the deciduous, but that primarily the bulk of it is deciduous trees, similar to what had been there before. But with the red cedar and the white pine, we did add in a bit of evergreens too that were not previously there. And then for the shrub layer, we do have red twig dogwood and high bush blueberry. So a little bit of winter interest with the red twig dogwood, as well as the high bush blueberry gives some food for wildlife out there. Let me think, what else am I missing? I think that's the bulk of it. I can zoom in if anyone wants to look a little bit closer here.
Let's go ahead. Commissioners, questions for Regan or for Mr. Long?
Regan, Carl, I think it's a good mix that you came up with. It's good diversity, and a lot of those species we don't necessarily have in Littleton, so it'd be I think it's a good mix.
I do have one question, Regan, if you've specified this somewhere and I've missed it, I apologize. What's the survivability threshold that you intend to meet here? In other words, I'm assuming we're going to monitor this for a certain amount of time. How much survivability is acceptable?
Well, that's typically, in my experience, that's usually something that the commission would, if we were going through a notice of intent, that would be a condition. So I think that would be something, ideally where, we want them all to survive, but we know that that's not always realistic. So I guess that would be, I'd defer to the commission on what you have typically found acceptable. Is it 90% and over, how long would we be monitoring? Typically you'd be wanting to monitor over the first few years to make sure that that's everything is established and surviving. But I think that's really a conversation that we have with the commissioners.
Recently, I think, Regan, what we've been going is 3 years for monitoring.
And have you set a survivability rate that you're looking for?
I think we assumed, and this might be old data, Carl, you might remember this a little bit more coming from the tree aspect, that I think we thought a 30% standard loss annually.
I think that sounds very fair.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, Sarah.
Okay.
I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure we've included it in the record what the performance criteria are. I'm actually a little less worried about exactly what the numbers are, as long as we have frankly, a Carl and Sarah approved plan. Then I'm good.
Board members, if I might add in, we tried to take into consideration a good blend of sizes. The smaller trees will help to adapt, and I have to say Dwight is very focused on getting this to do really well and anxious to get it planted so that we can take advantage of the spring
Yeah.
growing season. But I'm very confident we'll have a better than 80 to 90% survival rate with all of this plant material.
Are you going to buy the plants local?
Yes, Carl, they'll come from New England Wetlands plants, some from Fry's Corner out of Connecticut. Those are the two. There might be some. Those are the two biggest sources. There might be some coming from Cavicchios out of Sudbury, but those are those would be some of the bigger.
Yeah,
trees.
the ones coming out of Cavicchio would be kind of like the sycamores and the things like that. Is that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Regan, for the commissioners, if you just want to talk about access for how because there's limited access in terms of that cart road, so we're assuming that a lot of this is going to be somewhat manual or obviously no big track equipment for any of this.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So the existing crossing here is what would be used to get in there. And I mean, Joe, jump in at any point if you want to talk about your means and methods. But obviously there's other equipment that crossing can handle. Small trucks and smaller tractors of sorts. But there wouldn't be any heavy equipment to get the stuff.
Now we'd be using a mini excavator. It's got rubber tracks on it, and also a small track skid steer, not a skid steer, but a bobcat on tracks as well, just to get the plant material out there and work on getting plant median out there as well. But nothing, no big rubber tire machines out there at all.
Commissioners, your thought on that with the equipment?
No, it's the appropriate equipment, Sarah.
Okay. Anyone else have any other questions? Tim, how would you like for us to proceed with this?
I think if you just want to do like an informal vote that you guys are satisfied by this replanting plan, and they can get going on it.
Okay, commissioners, anyone else have any questions? Okay. If not, do we have a motion for this?
I'll move that the Littleton Conservation Commission approve the replanting plan on the plan titled Phase 1 Restoration Planting Plan for the property located at 359 King Street with the monitoring plan as discussed.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Carl.
Come guy.
Ed.
Ed Foltz, aye.
Kyle.
Maxfield,
Chase Gerwig.
Michael Livingston, aye.
Sarah.
Sarah Seward, aye.
Myself, aye. It's unanimous.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Long, if you can just keep in contact with the conservation office when you mean to get going on all this.
Okay. We'll definitely reach out to Tim.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you all so much.
Okay, let's go ahead. I'd like to finish up with the administrative discussion, the CPC application updates. Tim?
Yeah, that was just a quick one, just updating you guys that at the last CPC meeting last week, they approved funding for the 2 remaining applications we had in front of them for the boardwalks at Webster and at Castle in the Trees. So all of our applications in the spring got approved.
Okay.
Nice job, all.
Excellent.
That's great.
Okay, thank you. It's 7:49. Let's go ahead and start with our 7:45 continued discussion. This is enforcement order, non-permitted dredging, and this is 8 Blood Road. You'll recognize that we have 2 separate hearings on this. Who's here to speak to 8 Blood Road?
So I'm promoting over John right now. And if you want, Sarah, I can kind of give you an update.
Let's make sure John gets in okay. And John, when you're here, if you can introduce yourself, please.
John Scott, 8 Blood Road.
Okay, thank you. Tim, over to you.
All right, so it's obviously been some time since we last talked about this, so I'll catch everybody up to speed. We were waiting on the snow to melt to do a site walk, and the snow finally melted. And in the meantime, you guys had asked if I reach out to DEP and ask them what they thought about this situation. And so I spoke with them, and they got back to me on what their recommended guidance is. For both this enforcement order and the enforcement order at 2 and 6 Blood Road. And what they recommended is that there be a third-party peer review done to determine how much material was taken out during the excavation. With an emphasis on whether or not it surpassed the 99 cubic yard limit that the state has, where if you go above that, you need to get additional water quality certification from DEP. Within that third-party peer review, have there be recommendations on what should be done going forward to remediate or restore? And basically the commission take that into consideration when making their decision on what the remediation and restoration should be. On top of that, they suggested that the commission implement some sort of time period where the area shouldn't be disturbed to allow the area to renaturalize. And so me and Lauren...
Tim, did they specify what that time period was, or are they relying on our judgment to determine
No, they didn't give a suggested time period. They
Okay.
left that up to... They suggested that the commission come up with that time period.
Okay.
Yep. So me and Lauren were able to get out there yesterday, and we met with John, Gail, and Irv. And I sent around not so much a site walk report, but just photos that we took of the site while we were out there. So I don't know if all you guys got a chance to look at that. If not, I could pull up photos.
You just pull the photos up briefly.
Sure.
Thanks.
But that about sums it up.
Okay. Commissioners, questions? I'm hopeful that we'll be able to schedule a time that we can all go out, hopefully together, and to have John there as well. That would be great. But once we have the pictures up, Tim, if you just want to go through those, and then questions for commissioners.
Yep. So this is kind of standing in between, I believe it's 8 and 6 Blood Road, looking towards 6 and 2 Blood Road. And so a lot of the area that was excavated is, and maybe all of it is underwater right now. And you really can't see, at least we couldn't see when we were out there yesterday, into the water to see, like, we couldn't make out where the areas were that were excavated. It's just difficult to, you can't see the base of the lake.
So Tim, is the material that was seen on the slope, was that part of the excavated material?
You're talking about like this material right here?
Yeah.
I don't believe so. I think the excavated material was. I'm confused, Carl. Are you asking if it was like deposited here, or if this area was excavated?
Yeah, deposited there.
No. To my understanding is that the material was trucked off and deposited on the farm.
Okay.
John, you're muted. Do you want to step in here and just kind of maybe walk through some of that as well?
All that existing sand was there already. None of that is disturbed by any means.
Okay. Yeah, Tim, just go ahead and scroll through those so that the commissioners and public can see those.
Sure.
So in regards to, John, some of these comments, have you been made aware of some of this feedback yet in terms of third-party review?
Yes, Tim, let me know that. Not fully sure what they'd be able to see. I'd really love you guys to come out and do a site walk to kind of see the area before issuing a third party review. Save everyone a little bit of time and money.
With enforcement orders, we try and have as many commissioners come out, but also understand that we do have directive from DEP as well with the third party review. So, commissioners, questions for Mr. Scott?
Yeah, sorry, I did have one question. Actually, Tim, if you can stay right here. Mr. Scott, was this the access point was this the only access point into the water, or are there other access points to the water other than the one photographed here?
I'd say primarily right there was the access point, which is the boat launch.
Okay.
An old boat launch that is on 2 Blood Road, I believe.
Okay.
And I believe he has a photo facing the other direction. You can see it's a packed hill with no erosion. Not that. Yeah. So maybe we don't have a photo going up the hill, but as you can see, there's no erosion anywhere.
Going up the hill? Yeah. So if you were to do a 180 from this photo, there is no erosion. Like John said, there's no erosion up the hill.
Okay. Because I thought we had talked about putting erosion controls in place.
If I remember right, it was upon the site inspection, if we noticed that it was not stable, that I could ask John to install them.
Okay. So, but it's your opinion, Tim, that we don't need them based on the conditions that you saw?
There was no there was no really erosion that I could tell out there. I mean, there's tire tracks, but I mean, there's no goalieing, channeling, and we just had a bunch of runoff. So I feel like if it was going to happen, we would have seen it from all that snow runoff. But
okay,
we've had some rain here recently too.
Sure. Right, and we can take a look at it again during the site visit. But long story short, there's not some imminent risk here of furthering the issues. Got it.
Hey, John, just refresh me. What was the goal of the dredging?
So this photo here is a good example. As all the winds and blow all the chopped up weeds from all the boats every year into our cove, and they just grow. And the main thing was to get invasive weeds out of our cove so that the kids can swim in the future and not be swimming through weeds. I sent Tim a map of the Friends of Forge Pond. Their study of all the weeds in the lake, and our cove is red in pretty much every invasive weed that the lake has to offer. So that was the main driving factor, was to get all the invasive weeds out of there and hopefully have a swimmable, usable beach in the future.
Tim, can you go back?
Is this the typical water line now? The spring, summer, fall water line?
The water will probably be up another 1.5 feet or more. Almost to the leaf line in the far end of this picture is probably where the water will come to.
And how far out did you go to remove the weeds and what have you?
We stayed on where the weeds and everything was pretty much dry and frozen. So we stayed in the dry, frozen area. We never touched any water or, loose stuff, or just we're digging out frozen mud, frozen weeds.
So how far from this water line would that have been? I know the drawdown was good this year.
It was a good drawdown. Maybe 30 feet. I really can't. I'm totally guessing because it's hard to tell. When the water came up, it brought a lot of the mud back in with it. So it's really hard. I can't give you a definitive answer.
So, Tim, can you go back to the picture with the boat ramp? So from here, is this the extent of how much 2 was involved? Was the fact that the ramp was used for access? Seems most of the work was on the 6-8 section.
Primarily, yes.
Okay, so
Well,
then,
it kind of blends between the property lines, but yes.
I get that, but the remediation work will focus on 6-8.
Well, to be clear, it'll focus on town-owned land, not 6 or 8, but
Yes.
the work was not on 6 or 8 or any private property. All the work occurred on town-controlled property.
Yes, what I'm trying to say is most of the work or all of the work is going to not be done at this section here is what I'm trying to understand. But I hear you. I'm getting the terminology wrong as usual. Okay, thanks.
Other commissioners have questions, comments?
I did have a comment. I wanted to sort of talk through what the peer review could look like if the objective is to understand or develop an estimate of how much sediment was removed. That strikes me as doable. Obviously, it won't be precise, but it will give us a reasonable understanding as long as the peer reviewer is using reasonable methods. So I think we'll want to work with the peer reviewer to understand their approach to that. I would tell you here, I would expect like a sonar-based bathymetric survey, something that actually collects the surface elevation data, should be able to tell us where the extent of work stopped. And we can probably have them reconstruct a surface from there.
So Chase, I did get to speak with Green International, and they didn't go into the details of how they could do the survey, but they did say that they can do a survey.
Okay. I guess the other thing that I would suggest that they do is, it's fairly shallow out there, right, John? Right. Now, a couple feet.
It's probably over 3 feet now.
Okay.
And as it keeps going up, it'll probably get to 4 to 5 feet deep right there.
Okay, but not super deep. I would expect, Tim, that they can also, I would like them to put a push core or two in there because we'd like to understand how much detritus and how much new sediment has accumulated in there. And I think what we heard, I think, a couple weeks ago is that it was taken down to essentially native gravel. Is that right, John? Or some gravel surface?
We try to stay above it as much as possible to keep rocks out of the field.
Sure. So I think we could probably use that to infer how much sedimentation has occurred in that footprint and sort of add that back in. In other words, what I'm getting at is I think a combination of bathymetry and a couple push cores could tell us a lot about how the extent of the impacts here.
It's going to be a complete shot in the dark, Mr. Scott, but is there any chance that the material you removed is just piled in the field, or has it already been spread?
I would assume it's already spread, but you'd have to ask Mr. Matheson that one.
Okay, we'll get to that. We do have a hands up with a question, so I want to just to be clear, we're going to finish up with commissioners' questions, and then we'll get to attendees. Any other commissioner?
Yeah, yep. Hey Sarah, is it possible when the third party goes out there, peer review, could they look on either side of where this dredging was to see what the invasive structure looks like?
I think what may be best is yes, I would say we'll come up with a list, but I also think as the commissioners go out onto the site, we'll come up with a list to direct Tim and Lauren going forward of some of your wishes in that report.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any way we could have Green go on the site walk with us? It seems like, obviously we're going to go out there, but are we missing a step by not having them on site and talking to us face to face while we're looking at what's going on and hearing their approach, seeing their approach?
I don't know. Is Green going to be the reviewer?
I guess I'm reach out to 3 if we want and say, hey, there's an opportunity for a third party review. Are you interested? And if there's 2 firms that would be
Right.
interested, then,
It
kind of
would
like
be-
a little pre-bid type meeting.
Yeah, but it is the applicant's prerogative, I think, to put forth a name and then we would approve it, correct? Tim?
I believe that's how we've done it in the past. Basically.
But yes, Kyle, I think it would be great, but we can't take that liberty of knowing who that.
I think we typically inform the property owner, the applicant, that we see green a lot, and most times they just run with green.
I would just like to make sure if Mr. Scott is going to go with green to do this, that they actually have the capability to do the underwater surveying. What I don't want them to do is go out and simply drop a surveying pole from a boat and collect point surveys. If we do that, what we're not going to do is catch the edge of, essentially, right, we've sort of excavated a small swimming pool. We're not going to catch the edge of that small swimming pool. We're not going to, because we need that to reconstruct the lines of where it was previously. Sediment surfaces, particularly in areas like this, tend to be fairly contiguous. So we just need the whole footprint, not a point survey.
So one thing I would say is the mud during the summer is very, very airy and it floats around. So I feel like it'd be very hard to tell. I would be shocked if the entire area we dug out is entirely filled with sediment again, to the exact same flush, pretty level area. It flows like it's water. I walked in the mud, like as the ice was receding and the water was so low, I walked out past the area and it was just soup. It's just all just soup mud over there and weeds, and I'd find it very hard. There's not going to be a line of anything.
Would there be a line of vegetation where you kind of stopped? Because that's the only thing I can do. I agree. I think it's going to be difficult to find, especially if it is, it comes and goes. But if there's a line of vegetation, that's what I'm hoping there might be.
And now if we brought Greener out and they said this is just a waste of time and money, would you guys agree with that decision, or would you make them do it anyways?
I mean, this is something the Mass DEP has indicated that we should go forward and do. My inclination is we can take a guess as to whether or not it's going to be useful or not, but we're not going to know until we do it. And given that we've got Mass DEP telling us that this is a thing that they think should be done, I'm disinclined to do anything but fulfill it.
Of course, I'm just saying if they came forward and said, we're as a third party, we don't believe that this is going to be useful information for the conservation.
I'm open, John. I will tell you, I'm open to alternative approaches to try and estimate the volume if what I've put forward is not ideal, but I do think we need to make a reasonable effort to collect whatever data might be available to allow us to make these estimates as directed by Mass DEP.
All right. One other question is, what harm would any of this have possibly caused anybody? Like, why do we have to do this?
John, that's a long answer to that and well outside of the scope of this meeting. Suffice to say, there's an extensive list of harms that are associated with dredging without appropriate controls that could happen. And on top of that, it wasn't permitted, it wasn't approved, it wasn't on your property. So I think we should just leave it at that.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and now move on to Nova facilitator. If you could, you're now allowed to speak. If you would like to introduce yourself and if you have a question, please.
Me okay?
Yes, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I couldn't change my name when I logged in. This is Jillian Huffnagel. I grew up at 57 Mattawanakie Trail, which is directly across the lake from this property. I can tell you from living on this lake, I'm now 44 years old. I've lived on this lake since I was 12. That shoreline has not changed. And what John has said about the area that those kids are swimming in being like soup is 100% true. What I'm most concerned about right now is I own property at 41R Beaverbrook Road on the Westford side of the lake, right where Beaverbrook comes into the lake and pushes all of the water through. I would love to impress upon the committee right now that as an owner on the lake, and I'm a neighbor of Michael's, just a couple doors down from him, the invasive weeds are so bad that every single owner, not just John, is dealing with this same thing. So my biggest concern is if I go out and I rake my weeds, am I going to now get in trouble? If I go out and I try and pull those invasive weeds out myself, is the committee going to be coming after me and any of my other neighbors who are trying to respond to the fact that these invasive weeds have basically changed the ecological system of this lake over the past 20 years? And it's getting worse and worse and worse. That area that John described in red is growing significantly. When I attend the Friends of Forge Pond meeting every year, those areas are getting more significant. And so what I would really love to see this committee do is not just address this non-permitted dredging, but I would love this committee to address what is the future health and safety of this lake. This is an important lake for both Westford and Littleton community members, as well as other people who enjoy this lake that are not just from Westford and Littleton. This is part of one of the largest watersheds in Massachusetts. These invasive species are significantly debilitating the health of our water. And so while I know that you need to follow the processes and the steps that are appropriate to ensure that John and his neighbors have those investigations, I would love to see a little bit more energy towards not waiting until August to approve that we can use a weed rake to rake up our weeds last year. It was approved so late that by then all of the weeds were wet and soppy, and we couldn't actually hydro rake the weeds. So I would love more proactive approaches to how we're managing the ecosystem of the lake and protecting all of the species, not just going after people who are trying to clean up their weeds.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, anyone like to address?
When you have a lake that's got committees on two different towns working together is a challenge, for sure. I think we all agree that ideally it would be great to have some joint group of the two committees that could help manage this. I don't think that's in place today, and I'm not aware that anyone is trying to do that at the moment.
So Ed, we're actually going to be looking to enter an intermunicipal agreement with Westford to conduct the herbicides to treat the invasive plants. I'm not sure when that's going to occur. My understanding is that it could take some months, but we are looking into that and hoping to enter into that with Westford, because my understanding is they already have been doing herbicides over there. And so we're gonna join in on that and just split the costs that we were or the funds that we were approved by CPC are going to go towards that.
Cool.
Okay, great. We're going to keep things moving along. I think what we'd like to do is to schedule a site visit for 8 Blood Road. Commissioners want to throw out some date and times. I don't know if we can all get out there at the same time, but I can go almost any day next week or this coming weekend.
Sarah,
That's the same for me.
Do you think it's appropriate to add in Irv and Gail right now to try to coordinate with them as well?
I think because they're 2 separate hearings, we have to choose a date for one, and then if that works, that's great. If not, we create them separately.
Okay.
Commissioners want to throw out some dates or times?
I'd rather do it on the weekend, Sarah.
Okay.
And if you're available this weekend,
Yep.
morning would be ideal for me.
Okay, commissioners, anyone around this weekend?
Yeah, I actually am. So morning would work.
Which day would work better for you all?
No preference.
Yeah,
Jake,
no
Saturday or
preference.
Sunday?
6 to 1, half dozen the other.
Okay. Other commissioners? available this weekend?
If you're talking in the morning, Saturday, but, whatever, just not the middle of the day. Let's not chop up a whole day for.
Okay. So are we leaning towards Saturday morning? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep.
Sounds like it.
Okay, let's throw out a time.
9 o'clock work? Too early, too late?
Okay. John, will you be able to be there on Saturday at 9 or grant us access?
Yes, I'll be there at 9 or whatever works.
Okay. Let's go ahead and set that for 9 this coming Saturday. And where would we like to meet?
You can park in my driveway, 8 Blood Road.
Okay. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and move on with that. Thank you for joining us, John.
Sorry, one last thing though before we move on. I'm sorry. The other thing that Mass DEP specified here is to not disturb the area, and I think we should memorialize that our expectation, until told otherwise, is that we're not running motorboats over it. We're not putting docks in that weren't in. We're not disturbing that area. And once we have the surveying done, we can figure out what that means going forward. But for right now, no actions.
Yeah, thank you. They were very clear on that. Okay. So I think the thought process is we will meet this weekend and then go ahead and put this forward on the next agenda meeting, which is April 7th. So this would continue over to April 7th for the discussion. And then at that point, we can go through what we would like to see in the third-party review. Is that correct, commissioners? Is that what our time frame stands for?
I think that makes the most sense. Yeah, I don't want to commit to any sort of third-party thing until we can see the site.
Okay, great. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Okay, I know we're running behind schedule. It's 8:17. Let's go ahead and open our 8 o'clock continued discussion enforcement order, non-permitted dredging 2 and 6 Blood Road. Okay. So Tim, are you gonna move them over?
Yep, they're moving over right now.
Okay. Great. All right, so Herb, just so you know, you are muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep. Okay.
Perfect.
So I'm assuming you were privy to the first conversation.
Yes, we were.
And then Tim, if you want to go back to the photos, let's go ahead and see if the commissioners have questions. So these questions are pertaining to 2 and 6 Blood Road. I think that there were some questions in regards to some of the material that was moved, where it was moved to, and if it still exists or if it's got spread. Question for the Mathesons.
Okay, so that question is for us. Yes,
But that's.
we've already spread it.
Okay.
It went right out onto the
Mixed
field.
it with cow manure, and it's under the power line and on the hayfield too.
Yeah,
Which is for cow consumption. It's cow corn and hay, you know what I mean?
Horse hay.
It's not like vegetable land.
Yeah. Okay. Commissioners, questions for the Mathesons pertaining to 2 and 6 Blood Road?
Was it this, Sarah, was it the same type of dredging that we had just discussed?
well, I can answer that. Yes, we had our truck. This is the picture you're looking at right now. That is our boat landing. And our truck was parked there. And then John came over with the loader and just filled the truck. And then we drove up to the farm to dump it. but it's it's the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have any new questions, Sarah, unless the Mathesons think something needs to be corrected. I think I get it.
No, there's nothing that needs to be corrected. I guess my only comment on the third party is, when was the last time there was any kind of site mapping in the lake? Because you're saying that you can tell what we took out or what was taken out, but what's the standard? That's my question. I mean, what's the standard? You have to have a baseline if you're going to say, well, you took this out, but you would have had to have a standard. So when was the last time that this end of the lake was mapped, that they could compare? Because again, we also have where the water comes in from streams. So the material, as John said, is always moving. So I'm not sure that I think that they can give an accurate account of how much material left. And another thing that you should know is that this whole property, the whole farm, right down here to our house and 2 and 6, is nothing but gravel. Believe me, when I first moved in here, I tried to plant something. I couldn't even dig with a shovel. So that's another consideration, that there is nothing but gravel.
No,
Commissioners,
that's accurate.
I would like to comment on her question in terms of measuring or standard of scale.
Yeah, I would say, Gail, what we're looking for, to the extent that we do a survey, is to identify if we can see the depression in which the depression that was excavated. So in that,
and can I just say this?
Just let him talk. Let him talk. Sorry, Chase.
You asked a question. Would you like me to answer it, or should we just go forward with the peer review?
No, just answer.
And so what we are looking for is there a depression where material was removed? And to the extent that we can identify the depression, we can reconstruct the likely historic surface there by looking at areas outside of where that depression occurred, essentially connecting the dots from areas that were not disturbed. To the extent that it is already filled back in, that would be a challenge. If we had a pre-construction survey, that's actually exactly the kind of thing that is typically required in projects like this. But as we know, none of that occurred. So you're right, we don't have a baseline, but there is a reasonable chance that we can reconstruct a reasonable estimate of what was removed. Is it guaranteed? Of course not. But what we would be looking for is the depression and the edges where there wasn't excavation. And from those two things, we should be able to identify an estimate of volume.
Again, just coming from a long background in quality and manufacturing, if you don't have a baseline, it's really hard to judge. And I'm just going to say this.
Gail, if we're going to compare quals, I have 20 years of sediment remediation experience.
Excellent.
I don't think we're making any decent progress here of comparing one person to the other. Right. It's understandable that the emotions are starting to get high. And Gail, I think we all understand where you're coming from, and please understand that all we're here to do is to try and, in the most reasonable way possible, remediate what occurred. We're not trying to necessarily punish anyone. We're not trying to cause anyone to have to do something excessive. We're just trying to find the best solution here to remediate. That's all.
And I do appreciate that, Ed. Thank you. I mean, I guess we obviously are very concerned about the cost of this. John has a young family, we're farming. So, we are very concerned about the cost of what this will.
Yeah, and taxes are due 1st of May, right?
Yeah, taxes are due. I mean, are we talking about 5,000, 10,000, 25,000? 50,000 for this study, or 500. Like, we need to know this, because obviously You know, this is a big impact for both families.
I don't think that anyone's going to know anything until after the site walk. And it's
Okay.
already been stated that we're going to do the site walk, and then from that we can decide on the third party peer review and what have you.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
That's fair.
And at that
Yeah,
point, it's up to you to
We
find.
want you all to come out and see.
Yeah,
We definitely want you to
one-
come here.
Yes.
And if we say a third party peer review is needed, then it's incumbent upon you to find someone, and it's not unreasonable to say, well, you know, this person is equally qualified, but at a lower price. So that's
Okay.
not something we get involved.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. And so the question is, we want to work around your schedule as well. So we will be out there Saturday at 9. If that works for you.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
No, we want we want all of you to come and see, you know what I mean? It's
Yep.
not.
Okay. So just
I
with
need to
that
have a face,
being
you know?
said, that we'll start at 8 Blood Road, and then we'll welcome the opportunity to kind of walk your shoreland as well.
Yes.
And so
Yeah, you can walk actually right around.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. And so, as we mentioned earlier, what we would then do is carry this over to the April 7th. Nothing's going to get finalized tonight, probably not at the 7th. So we're just trying to give you guidance while we're trying to take in guidance as well, from the commissioners, also from DEP. Are there any questions I can answer or the commission can answer for you now at this minute?
No.
Sarah, you do have one more public comment from Ms. Hoffnagel.
Okay. Okay, if you would like to go ahead and reintroduce yourself, that would be great.
Hi, Jillian Huffnagel, 41R Beaverbrook Road. One of the things that's important to understand about this particular lake is that the flow rate of the water that moves through this lake is one of the fastest in this watershed. And so the analogy of using the swimming pool and being able to outline the swimming pool is not realistic in this lake. So what I would love to hear from the commission is, what do you all think is reasonable for an amount of money that these residents would pay for a private study, at which point you would then anchor on that and say, that is untenable?
I think I already said we don't know what is going to be needed. So because of that, we don't know what the cost will be. And the cost is actually going to be up to what the petitioners do to address what the commission is asking. So I personally have never been through it, so I can't even begin to guess what the cost would be.
And I'll add one more element to that, which is that in enforcement order issues, costs can be a problem. But a big reason that they're a problem is that we're in an enforcement order scenario anyway, right? Like none of us here likes the idea of issuing an enforcement order, but we've had to have people remove structures that they've built, redo landscaping that impacts resource areas. None of us take it lightly, but the costs that are incurred are inflated significantly because of the enforcement order issue, because this is done without authorization, without controls, and without permission. And so I deeply appreciate the costs incurred, but I don't think that we're looking at this the right way if we're only looking at it through a cost lens and permitting after the fact.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions that we have? Okay, so we will look forward to seeing you on Saturday, approximately 9 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it is now 8:30. We're going to go ahead and open our 8:15 continued public hearing, discussion of current and future land use of town-owned parcel U12-14-0. I'll turn this over to Chase. And all yours.
Sounds good. Thank you, Sarah. Let's see. I'm gonna, before I get into this, let's see. Could we promote Karen Morrison, please? And Jenny. Okay, we've got Jenny Merrill. And so I wanted to promote into as a panelist Jenny Merrill from Town Council's office, who's been helping us with this, and Karen Morrison, the chair of the select board. So here's where we're at. We've discussed this a few times. We've looked at some alternatives. Where I would like to get to tonight is ultimately we take a straw poll on different alternatives for 3 different issues associated with this Long Lake parcel. The docks issues, the sort of upland landscaping issues, and the kayaking canoe storage issues. And all 3 of those originate from the Wetlands Protection Act, let's say, violations that we had identified earlier. The goal here is not for us to select exactly what we're going to do for each of those 3 components of this parcel, but rather to identify which alternatives people are generally supportive of and which they're not, because my sense is we've been kind of all over the place in terms of what, let's say, what might be acceptable to everyone. And on top of that, the last time we discussed this, we were going back and forth on some of the legal issues. And so Jenny has been kind enough to help us think about some of those issues. So what I would like to do is just talk you through, I sent this all around to you earlier, and if it's not yet on the public repository, it will be. And I'll actually share my screen this time instead of almost sharing it, so the public can see what we're looking at. What I'd like to do with everyone is I'd like to talk through the alternatives. I'll kick it over to Jenny a couple times to sort of fill things in a little bit, and then we can talk about each of both the upland, the canoes and kayaks, and the dock alternatives that we have. And while we're doing this, I would like you to think about which ones of these could I live with, which ones of these are my preferred options. So,
Chase, if I may, before we go any further.
Yep.
Why did we add in storage of kayaks and boats when that wasn't the originator of the issue? It was brought to us by Park and Rec asking for the use of one of our parcels to do this, but that doesn't mean that this should have been part of this whole discussion. So I'm confused what brought that in.
Well, what brought that in, Ed, is hang on one second, I'll find it for you. This has nothing to do with the parcel of land that Conservation Commission controls that is on the other side of Lakeshore Drive. The reason kayak and canoe storage came into this is because a number of the violations, Wetland Protection Act violations that we have, and frankly just issues that we have, are haphazard storage of canoes and kayaks on the parcels that we're talking about. Essentially, they're just sort of distributed all over the place. And that's why this came in. This doesn't really have anything to do with that square piece of land on the other side of the road. Does that answer your question, Ed?
Sure. Okay. Thanks.
So coming back to this, so as far as the upland alternatives, and here I think historically I'd called it the landscaping alternatives. We really have 3 options, right? We can, and we've talked about this, allow the parcel to simply revegetate, grow back in. There would probably need to be some invasive species management if we do that. I think there's always going to be some invasive species management. But in general, what's going on right now are the certain portions of this parcel are being mowed by members of the public, typically the abutters that live across the street. What we would be saying here is if we allow the parcel to just revegetate, we're telling people, we don't want you to do that anymore. Just let it grow back in. That one's pretty straightforward. Alternative 2 here is the town assumes the responsibility for maintenance of this parcel. That is, the mowing that is already occurring, the town would take that over. That's obviously not a triviality in terms of costs. And that's one of the reasons why this probably needs to be discussed in concert with the select board. But essentially in that scenario, the town would be responsible for mowing. They'd be responsible for tree trimming, vista pruning, the whole bit. And then alternative 3, and this is where I'm going to lean on Jenny a little bit to explain how it would have to come together, is the town essentially partners with the abutters and allows the abutters to maintain those parcels. So someone lives across the street, they've been historically mowing, that is part of the community's view shed, not just their view shed. And so in that scenario, we're partnering with people to allow them to continue to mow or otherwise maintain that land. Now, doing so would still require an order of conditions that essentially says what activities are allowed to occur on this property. It is our property, our order of conditions, but this is where I'm going to lean on Jenny. Jenny, my understanding is in this scenario, we would enter into essentially a license with folks and we would need like a waiver of responsibility or a waiver of liability from them. Is that generally right?
Yeah, I would recommend in that case, a license with, clear terms on what they can and can't do, tying it to any permit that you have issued, authorizing the work. And, we can get into, you can add all sorts of protections to a license, but some of them are probably not financially feasible for, abutters. But certainly, releases of liability, indemnification for any work that they've done, things like that is what I would recommend in that case.
And this would essentially memorialize the status quo right now. Now, I want to note for alternatives, for any of these alternatives, we're not necessarily locked into the status quo. That is, this is the town's property. The town can change how we're utilizing those pieces of property, but it really comes down to whether or not we want to revegetate it or not. And if we don't, do we want the town to assume responsibility, or are we willing to partner with abutters to maintain this property? So I think I'll pause there and see what comments or questions folks have. I think we should go through all the different alternatives before we come back and essentially take the straw poll. But with Jenny here to answer legal issues, we should take advantage of her.
Chase, I was thinking that the possibilities for this section kind of would follow from how many docks and other, what is going to be approved, just from what's left in the water now, or, how is that going to be managed before we could address these?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Michael. Whether it's the town or abutters maintaining pieces of this parcel, there's access issues, right? If we're going to have docks or we're going to store kayaks, or we also have to think about, I think, in the context of doing this, if we don't create opportunities for people to get to the water, we've seen that they'll create their own opportunities to get to the water. So part of that sort of fits into this too. Even if we did revegetate this, we may still want to think about, certain limited stone walkways or something for people to get to the water. I started with the easy one. Any other thoughts on this one or sort of clarifying questions?
What do you do if someone doesn't follow the whatever it is we tell them they can do?
Follow the license?
Yeah.
So our issues there would be twofold. If they actually get fully outside of the license and impact the resource area, we could pursue an enforcement order, right? Say they cut down a bunch of vegetation along the bank that they're not supposed to. That wouldn't be okay then. It's not okay now. And so I think the way that we would try and control that is being very specific about the boundaries of that. But there is a risk of, if we work with abutters to do this, that it's not done, let's say, consistently, right? One extra mower pass per couple of weeks, and all of a sudden the footprint gets bigger. The advantage of working with abutters to the extent that they want to is resources, right? So is essentially we're already in this right now. And so we would need to define the footprints and the boundaries, probably through an order of conditions. But I think it's probably doable, but that is a challenge.
And I think you can also start off on just an annual basis until you build up the trust and kind of learn the do's and don'ts as well.
And maybe this is important, Jenny, when we were talking about this, you used a very particular turn of phrase, but licenses, the town has to be able to cancel a license anytime for any reason.
Yeah,
right?
they're terminable at will.
There you go.
Yeah. And I would say, you would want a contract around this issue in the license, because you guys would be, the party responsible under the order of conditions, right? So if you think of it as, hiring a contractor to do work that you've been permitted to do, you would hold that contractor responsible for any violations of that order. And so, you'd probably want to draft some language around that, which, creates some unique policy considerations for you guys to think about,
I think we should also recognize that that is what's happening now, right? People are taking on that liability just without the framework around it. So,
Chase, if I can interject just as a point of reference for those people that are joining us as attendees, so that we understand, and for the commissioners to understand the structure of this hearing right now. Public comment, do you want to take it at the beginning?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Sarah.
Because I want to also be conscious of everyone's time, where we do have a lot to discuss. I would prefer to have kind of like, if anyone has any comments, to do them ahead of time. But so in the essence of kind of getting into more of a groove here, is you've got a lot, and then you would like to have straw polls from all of us. I don't want to get into a debate later on of what our kind of like tentative thoughts are. So
Sure.
Can you just kind of talk about the structure of this meeting?
Yeah, sorry, I should have started at the beginning. It's usually a good place to start. The plan that I had for this is we'll go through, I want to lay out all the alternatives. To Michael's point, some of them sort of fit together. Then I think engage with a discussion with the Conservation Commission about where we think the pros and cons are. Then I would like to set aside no more than 15 minutes for public comment. We're going to keep commenters to 3 minutes apiece. But I would ask commenters to, we have lots of written comment. We have lots of comment that we've received in the past. To the extent that there are new things, by all means, but let's try not to rehash what we did. Then after that 15-minute public comment period, I would like to then engage with the commission again, any follow-up questions or thoughts. And then what I would like to do is go through a straw poll. So Ed, I'm going to ask you here, for example, would you be okay with, which ones of these would you be okay with? Which ones of these would you be opposed to? And which one would you prefer? And essentially we'll do that for uplands, for kayaks and canoes, and for docks for each person. And I recognize that that's kind of cumbersome, but what's really important here is I don't know what the consensus is. We've been all over the map. So I think spending 5 or 10 minutes to just put tick marks. And Ed, I'm going to pick on you. Let's say you like 1 and 2, but not 3. That's fine. We're going to put a tick mark in 1 and in 2, because I think that'll help us figure out where there's agreement and where there's disagreement.
Understood.
And then once we do that, I think then we're done, and then we can take it to a discussion with the select board at a different meeting.
The one thing I would like to ask is that we not relitigate this. We've already gone through a lot of the discussions and what have you. And I know you addressed that somewhat in your statement here, but I'm not interested in hearing the same thing over again. We could be here all night.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. Any other initial thoughts on these alternatives, just understanding what they are?
So Chase, I'm thinking we're going to be hashing through each of these points. The goal of tonight is essentially to get the board's input in addition to the public comment that we've received and will receive tonight. Are we planning to come up with an overarching land management policy for the 3 different criteria for this parcel as an end product using the comments?
Yeah, I think the ultimate goal would be to create a cohesive approach to municipal properties along the lakeshore. And I choose my words very carefully there. It's not just this parcel, because the select board also has care, custody, and control of a piece of land sort of on the other side of the beach. And so I think thinking about those collectively, separate from, let's say, the large tracts of conservation land, right? We're not talking about Long Lake Park. We're talking about the parcels that abut residential areas, directly abut residential areas. But yeah, Andrew, the end goal would be a cohesive policy where all of these come together and we can implement it townwide.
Gotcha. So essentially, this isn't like the dead end, just for those watching the hearing, or this, actually it is a hearing, sorry, the hearing right now. This isn't a dead stop. It's essentially more fact finding, and then we'll work through with the select board to come up with a policy.
Correct. And part of the fact finding here that's different than what we've done before is we've got Jenny's expertise to weigh in on some of the liability and risk and sort of legal issues that we have identified in the past.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sorry, you guys are, I should have clarified all that before we started. Okay, let's talk about the alternatives for canoe and kayak. So right now, to Ed's point, why are we bringing this up? It's because we've had a de facto just sort of distributed kayaks kind of all over the shore historically. And so that begs the question, what is our policy? What do we want to do? And frankly, one of the alternatives could be, it's not here, could be, don't change anything. Let people put kayaks and canoes wherever they want. What I did hear from the commission is that's not really on the table. So our 3 alternatives are smaller than that. The first alternative is very simple. We don't want kayak and canoe storage. Done. It does raise an enforcement question, but let's assume for now that enforcement is relatively minor, right? In the sense that, if someone is trespassing on conservation land with materials, we may have to confiscate that or something, right? But an alternative where we just say no canoe and kayak storage. Alternative 2 is the more interesting one, I think. 2 and 3. So what we're doing in both 2 and 3 is designating select areas for canoe and kayak storage. The only difference between 2 and 3 is whether or not we essentially have racks that people can store canoes or kayaks on, or we just say, here's an area, we put up a sign, hey, you can leave your kayak here over the summer, but come September 30th, you got to pick it up. So we essentially have racks, or we have just put it on the ground and leave it. The reason those are different is sort of the licensing approach. And Jenny, wanted to know if you could sort of talk through how other communities have handled licensing things like canoe and kayak racks.
Sure. So if you guys wanted to, own some canoe and kayak racks, whether they're, donated or you acquire them some other way, we'd recommend licensing them via a lottery system. You shouldn't be giving favorable treatment just because somebody happens to live near the pond.
But Jenny, that license or that lottery can be confined to town residents, right?
Yep. You could confine it to town residents, sort of like an annual lottery. I'd imagine they would probably chain their kayak or canoe to their spot. I'd recommend charging, you charge a fee for that probably. And there's different ways of, you could do a new lottery every year. You could have somebody, be able to maintain their license, get first dibs on the license the following years if you want to. Sometimes do that. The license will be terminable at will, but you can put in a time frame in there that says, you have it for this season. However, unless the town terminates it in their own discretion. Yeah.
And then, Jenny, in terms of liability that the town is taking on in that case, we essentially, we asked the licensee in that case to waive liability. Do we have any major risks there?
I don't see any real major risks. We would write the license to make sure that they waive all, risk, that we're not liable for damage or theft. They're leaving their equipment there at their own risk. They're paddling at their own risk. Yeah, there is different ways to mitigate risk in all of these activities that we're talking about here. So if you were to allow people to do anything for free on open space or recreation land, you will allow yourself to be protected by something called the recreational use statute. That's one thing. There are good policy reasons not to do that, to require some sort of fee for licensing, their boat storage. You would also always be protected by the Mass Torts Claims Act, which constrains liability to $100,000. You also have insurance. You also can put up signs and contract away the liability. So there's many ways to protect you guys from liability. And I think this one is pretty harmless.
Yeah, this is sort of a preamble to the docs discussion.
Yeah, really. I mean, this is true of all activities, right? But on the scale of risky behaviors, I think offering boat storage is pretty low.
Okay.
And people are already taking the risk now by leaving their canoes along the side. And
it's almost like we coordinated this, Michael. That's what I was trying to show here. We have these are all the locations where we had boat storage. There are 34 boats that were stored, just sort of stashed along the lake.
So Chase, you had identified canoes and kayaks, and then you talk about boats. There's other marine vehicles other than boats and kayaks that were along there. So, should you just limit it to boat and kayak instead of just saying, canoes and kayaks instead of just saying boats?
Well, probably that's fair. What I meant to indicate here is essentially non-motorized boats. The fact of the matter is, I think we have canoes and kayaks predominantly, but you're right. Maybe that's paddle boards. Maybe that's other things. So maybe let's take it in the spirit of, I meant this to be broadly inclusive of non-motorized things that you might store along the lakeshore.
Weren't there motorized also along some of these docks?
Yeah.
Well, let's separate that from the docks discussion. What I'm talking about right now are the canoes and kayaks that were stored in the upland or just sort of pulled into the upland.
Oh, okay. I'm with you there. Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't very clear on that either, I guess.
Because I could easily see someone with an electric motor, a rowboat with an electric motor, stuff like that, to go out fishing or whatever. And, that's a motorized vehicle.
And Jenny, to the extent that we didn't, let's say, want that, could we confine the licenses to types of boats or types of equipment?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And Chase, does this address other private personal property that maybe aren't canoes, kayaks on the strip of land as well? Would we want to lump that into the same category, private personal property?
Give me an example. You mean like chairs and things?
Yeah.
I guess I would put that, I mostly meant that in the context of upland alternatives. You'll see here in the context of upland alternatives, there is some discussion of like, what do we do with, like, there's one portion of the property that has a retaining wall on it. But I think we certainly could license certain uses there. I'm not sure we would want things like, maybe we do, but things that could be picked up and taken away, like Adirondack chairs. But yeah, I would think we could find a place for those in whatever policy we decide. the big issue here is really, do we want to allow those sort of temporary uses or do we not? And if we do we want to provide the infrastructure for it, or do we just want to say, here's an area? Because alternative 3 is just, you can store this stuff here, whatever it is, go for it. We're not going to encumber ourselves with this whole messy license process. Leave the boat in this area or this area at your own risk. And even that is an improvement over this, right? Because right now we've got, I don't know, a dozen different locations where things are stashed. We might say we want one area here, and one area over here. Something like that.
How do we reconcile with the fact that we told the Park and Rec that they could not put racks and stuff up to make money for Park and Rec on the conservation parcel, but now we're doing or considering doing the exact same thing?
I'm not sure we need to. I mean, I think to the extent that if we decide to do that, what we're saying is we didn't think that was the right piece of property for it. And I think there are probably a lot of reasons for why that might be the case, but let's just take something simple. Ed, you're talking about this parcel right here. If you can see my cursor,
yes.
There's obviously not a big interest in leaving canoes and kayaks over there, right? It's access to the beach. It's close by. We're talking about racks here or here or here. So I don't know if I have to apologize to Parks and Rec for saying no to their thing and yes to ours, then I'll say I'll apologize.
Just putting it on the table.
Yep. Any other thoughts on this one before we get to the really messy one? Okay, this is the messy one, but it's actually not as complicated as it looks. So one of the pieces of feedback that we got from the community was an interest in essentially comments that say, we think 6 docks is the appropriate number of docks. And I don't know whether or not we agree with that, but I felt like we at least we owed the public having that discussion. So what you're going to see here is there's alternative 1, 2, 3, and 4, but alternatives 2, 3, and 4 differ only in 2 docks versus 6 docks. And I think we should understand, if anyone is willing to approve a dock, how many we're talking about. And there's nothing magical about 2 and 6. It could be 3 and 7. It could be 1 and 5. But essentially imagine these as a small number and a larger number of docks. So taking you through the options here. Option 1, again, very easy option. No new permits for docks on this parcel. And the reason I say no new permits is because don't forget that Parks and Rec is installing a dock roughly right here. And so when I say no new permits, I deliberately exclude the Parks and Rec dock that will go in actually off of this parcel. This does beg the question, what do we do with the existing structures? We would have to figure that out. I think that's a very solvable problem. Alternative 2 is, we have all these docks that have existed historically. And alternative 2 says, you know what, we're not going to do these here. Let's see. There are currently 9 docks that have been identified, 8 along this parcel, but of those 8, 2 of them are in particularly bad shape. I would argue 3 of them are in bad shape. But essentially what we would be saying here is we don't want any private participation in our dock process. This is resource intensive, but this alternative is the town acquires new docks and the town is responsible for installing and removing those docks, right? We choose the locations, we choose the docks, we choose the timing, we choose the number. Part of the constraint here, and I'll kick it to Karen probably in a moment, is resource constraints issues. And I don't think this is probably something that, even if we wanted to do it, is something that we could do right away. Karen, do you have a minute to weigh in on that, and how probably buying half a dozen docks is not immediately in the budget?
Sure. So, again, I can't speak for my colleagues, but just in terms of the general financial outlook for the town and how difficult it was to get this year's budget balanced, we did not expect any windfalls unless there's been any money trees somewhere that we don't know about. So we're much more in a maintenance of service mode than we are in an expansion service mode.
And so what that doesn't take off the table is maybe CPC funds, but I think CPC has been very good to us, but we would really strain credibility to go in with a request for 6 docks if that was the number that people wanted.
I think that could be a viable project, though, certainly for the community if we did go in that direction. But yeah, we could certainly talk that through, if that's something that the commission's interested in.
And Andrew, am I right to think that if this was a direction that we wanted to go, whether it's 1 or 2 or 6, that we would be able to make an argument probably for a conservation and a recreational sort of application?
So in this instance, it would be a recreational category project sponsored by us. So
okay.
In my opinion, it'd be an eligible project, and we have precedent, from the Recreation Department applying for funds under the same category to get funding for docks. So we know that's already an option that we could explore for docks if we wanted to go down that route. But yeah, it really just depends on what the commission has an appetite for, and I'm happy to assist with filing any projects.
So the other issue in every one of these subsequent docks is licensing. So one of the things that I'm going to ask you all with respect to each of these dock alternatives is your appetite for licensing a portion of the dock for a private boat. So in this scenario, we could just put docks in that are town controlled and no one's allowed to tie up there for any unreasonable amount of time. And we can figure out what that is in a policy context. The other alternative is that although it's a public resource, we could grant licenses to allow people to keep a boat there. And Jenny, licenses here, can you walk us through the process? It would essentially still be a lottery system.
Yeah, I would recommend you still use a lottery system, and the licenses would be terminable at will, and we would put in the license as many protections as we can, think of and get agreement for, to fully protect the town. There's various risks associated with allowing them to dock at the dock. The dock would be the town's property, so that includes damaging the dock itself, and needing to help pay for the repairs. But yeah, we'd have to work out on a framework of a different type of license, but it would, again, waiver of risk, waiver of liability, indemnification provisions, insurance, okay. Probably.
So a little bit of a bigger lift than the kayaks, but probably simpler than the next one we're going to talk about, where we're actually receiving docks from people, right? These are, okay. The next alternative essentially says, we as a town, we don't like the idea of having, we don't like the risk profile. We don't like having essentially private docks on public land. So in this scenario, if people wanted to donate docks to us, right, this is sort of the bridging the funding gap kind of issue. Like maybe the long-term plan is fully public docks, but let's say in the interim, there are a couple of folks who want to donate docks to the town, and then the town receives that donation and is responsible for owning those docks after the donation. So we get over the initial hurdle of purchasing the dock, which could be a funding challenge. And I don't mean here by putting this out there to suggest that anyone has even said that this is on the table. But I think we should discuss whether or not we would even be willing to accept donations of docks if we were to put them in. And so in this scenario, we would accept the donation of the dock. We would decide where it goes in. And the town would be responsible for putting it in. But in this scenario, I imagine we would probably be looking for public help to put it in. Ideally, the person who donated it help the town insert the dock. In this scenario, though, after that dock is donated, from a who owns it perspective, the dock is the town's. And so what this resolves is what you'll see in the next issue is if a private property if a private property owner owns the dock and we simply give them a license to put the dock in place, the insurance requirements and their liability changes dramatically as well. So in this scenario, they give us the dock. We would still need to figure out how do we evaluate the suitability of that dock? Is it safe? Is it appropriate? All of that stuff. But let's assume that we could get over those hurdles. Jenny, any other thoughts on this one that I didn't cover?
Just to be aware that, if you're using public resources, volunteer help to install the dock, the town is still, on the hook for, any mistakes there that lead, that could cause harm or damage to somebody, which, we can protect against. We've got insurance. And again, using the dock, especially if you're using the dock for free, would be protected by the recreational use statute. But it's just something to consider, that it's not, you don't have quite as many protections as you do if you hired someone to put in the dock and they owe you a duty of care, that you could then turn to them and say, help pay for this, this harm caused to this human who, stuck their hand on a rusty nail or something.
So in this scenario, Jenny, the risk profile might be different, but the specific risk might be different, but the risk profile is very similar to working with someone to construct a boardwalk at a conservation property, right? They're a volunteer. They're working with us to build a boardwalk. Right.
And especially, if they're in charge of the means and methods, right? It's one thing, I don't know what you guys do, how you guys do a boardwalk. Like, do you have an engineer or somebody design it? Or is it just sort of as you go, lay down wood and nails and hope it's secure?
It's somewhere in between those two. We're certainly not engineering them, but we're not just we're not just shooting in the dark either.
But again, in those instances, I imagine that those areas are open to the public for free, which is a huge protection for you guys.
And in this case, these docks would be open to the public for free as well, with the exception of whether or not we decided to license the ability to keep a boat on this dock.
In which case we would contract around that risk.
Okay. And then the fourth option is where we there is no donation of the dock. In this case, the distinction between 3 and 4 is in 3, someone is donating the dock to us. And if we're licensing anything, we're licensing access to the dock via with a motorboat. In 4, what we're actually doing is licensing a private property owner's location to install a dock. And in this context, my understanding and my read from everybody is we didn't like the idea of fully private docks. I mean, that's the whole reason we're here. So in theory, I suppose we could license it and say, you're the only one that's allowed to use it. My sense from the commission is that that's a non-starter. So a component of this license would be that they have to allow access to the public to this dock. Now, by virtue of that license, I'm assuming that we would also be licensing a place for them to keep their boat on it. I suppose we could exclude that via a license, but it doesn't strike me as practical that we would actually go that direction where we say, sure, you can put in a dock, but you can't keep a boat there. That would, I think, be the core motivation of folks to do that. So in this scenario, we probably have bigger issues in terms of verifying the safety of the infrastructure. But on top of that, the licensee now is really sort of getting in bed with us in terms of providing a service to the public. And so now there are certificates of insurance, there are liability waivers, as well as the much more mundane things like complying with orders of conditions and so on that would need to be done. In this scenario, though, I think Jenny hit on it. We, the Conservation Commission, in all of these scenarios, we are filing the notice of intent or the RDA. We are obtaining the order of conditions. We are passing the requirement to comply with those onto the whoever we're partnering with, whether that's mowing or docks. We would also have to sort out how Chapter 91 licensing works here, but suffice to say, if this is a pathway that people want to go down, it's viable. So I've talked for a while and I'm really sorry for that, but that, I promise, that is the end of the talking parts. And now perhaps we can understand what folks are thinking in terms of what makes sense for the public. Everybody all at once?
Well, thank you for doing all of this, Chase, and putting this together. So is the plan to run through these individually once more and to kind of get individual input?
Yeah, I think we can do that, right? I mean, like, I don't think we need to be confined to Michael's original point. I don't think they're all completely independent issues. So I don't want to say, oh, we're only going to talk about the uplands. But yeah, let's get input from members of the commission first.
Chase, do you want someone to tally, or?
Well,
I guess
what I envisioned is if there are discussions that we need to have or questions, I think once we get to the point of tallying, I'll just go through and ask people and we'll tally them.
Okay, thank you.
But essentially, does somebody want to make an argument for why we should do one thing versus the other?
I think I've made it pretty clear we shouldn't be in the boat storage business.
I kind of agree that I like to keep it simple personally. It's having a bunch of licenses and different docks. It's just, I think we're making a situation that we couldn't have very simple, very complex.
Mm-hmm.
I think I look at equal access, and so I don't like the idea of ground storage. I think that would be a free-for-all. I have seen licenses with lotteries work well, more ocean-based, but and that would be, for me, comfort level would have to be on an annual basis. So I would lean more of a combination of that.
This all started because somebody wanted to put a dock and was told no and said, yeah, but what about these people? And I think you identified, if I remember correctly, 6 docks that essentially were acceptable condition and 3 that were not.
That's what I've been told. I'm certainly not someone who...
Sure, no, I get it. Where I was going with it is, so if we made those 6 docks grandfathered, the person that, or anyone that comes along and says, well, I'd like to have one, no, you can't. But oh, by the way, these 6 already exist. You know, it just going along with Kyle's comment about keep it simple. You know, if we start to get into all this licensing, and now we have to enforce the license, and we have to do the all. Tim doesn't have enough to do. I guess he would have to do all the stuff that goes along with it, and and, so forth. As to the observation of, well, people have been leaving their kayaks on the shore side. Well, we stopped letting them do that, and it's not our place to provide people an easy way to put their kayak or canoe or whatever. And there's already a boat ramp. That's about as easy as you're going to get, So I don't know, just feel like we've made a big project out of something that might have been maybe not as big. And that's not an insult to you, Chase, because you put a huge amount of effort into it.
No,
Go ahead, Carl.
No. All the effort that Chase has done is like crazy beneficial, and something that we had to go through even to get to this point. That's I'm going to say right now.
Let me lay out my argument for why I think we should be a little more open-minded about access. From start at the sort of landscaping and vista pruning issues, setting aside, let's say, the sort of privatization of little nooks of this property, I'm not opposed to sort of the open vistas that we have. I think if we want to make conservation voters, the number one thing we can do is stand them on Lakeshore Drive and look across the lake at Long Lake Park and go, that's why you're a conservation voter, right? And if that's all vegetated in, people have a hard time seeing that. They have a hard time taking in what's there. So I think we need to maintain some process by which we provide vegetation management and control there. I'm comfortable with either the town doing it or abutters doing it. I don't think that's a big deal, but I think we should be careful about thinking about that. From a canoe and kayak standpoint, I really come at it sort of like Sarah from an equity standpoint. I want people to be able to access the lake. And I appreciate that the boat ramp is over there, but the majority of people who live by the lake live on the other side of the beach. They live closer to this parcel. And I just don't see a big impediment to having a few racks there that allow people to access the lake. Again, my primary motivation is, how do you make more conservation voters? You put them in kayaks, right? And let them paddle around the lake. So there, I think the nominal cost of racks, the slight pain in the ass of a licensing system, it's put a tag on it and move on. So that one I'm okay with. In terms of docks, my ideal outcome would be fully town controlled docks. I would be comfortable with some of those being a license to keep a motorboat there, but I'd rather keep it small rather than large. And one of the things there that I think will frustrate the public is that license is fully a lottery, right? There's no process by which you get sort of two entries into the lottery because you live close. So I think that would be a frustration, but I don't think it is unreasonable to make it possible for a few motorboats to be there. What I don't want is expanding beyond that. And so to that end, as long as these other alternatives for docks are essentially looking towards the future where we get to the place where we are fully just town-owned docks, and whether it's 3A or 4A is sort of an interim measure, I'm okay with that. I think we can buy and put in a few docks over time. But I do think having docks here is important, not just from a boating perspective. I mean, purely selfishly, my son loves to fish. If he had 4 docks to fish off of, he would be 4 times happier, right? And again, like, birding, fishing, getting in with kayaks and canoes, I think that's all better and more accessible with some docks. So I'd be willing to find a way to deal with it, even if the liability scheme isn't ideal in the short term.
I kind of go along with that, Chase. And I think one of the qualifications for approving some of our things is that it's in the public's good to be able to have access. You know, it gives everybody the opportunity to enjoy the spaces. You know, my only hesitation is that it just doesn't turn into a free-for-all or an ever-expanding footprint. And I'm not really sure how to do that, but I think taking it all away isn't the right choice either.
So I would be against motorboats completely. I don't think that should be allowed. I think the town should own all the docks, and if we want to install some kayak racks along that green space, I think we should install some kayak racks. I agree, Chase. More access you give the public, the better, and the easier the access, the better. But I do think it all needs to be town-owned and town-managed.
Yeah, I agree with that too, Carl. And it's not about ease for me. It's more about controlled, right? Where we're saying these are the spots, and we have control over the maintenance and quantity, volume, instead of just having a free for all on the entire footprint of the lake or the shoreline of the lake. Whether it's racks or not, I guess I don't really have a preference. If racks would make it a smaller footprint or allow more folks to keep their equipment there, then that's fine.
I think, Kyle, the big advantage to racks is a place to lock it up more than anything.
Okay, that's fine. Sure. If you're willing to, if you want to leave your dock, I mean, that comes down to just a cost on us then, or cost on the town, right? As far as the docks, yeah, I appreciate everything that you've done, just like everybody has said. I'm finding it difficult to pick one or two of these that I think is the right way to go. I do think that it should be a town regulated, owned process, but
I mean, the challenge for you then, Kyle, is whether or not you would be comfortable with it's town controlled because it was donated to the town, right? Like that gets
it almost, and we've talked about ease a lot, right? Like why is there a way to not reconstruct the wheel here and use the 6 docks that are existing and maybe supplement with 2 the new docks that the town purchases, or is that completely off the table? Like I don't see
I mean, the way to do that, sure, we could essentially hybridize, alternatives 3 and 4 with 2, but in that case,
so this is where I was struggling, right? Because I like those 3 combined. So.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
I would almost take all the docks out, put new docks in that the town wants. We know they're good docks, standard docks. It's going to cost, there'll be a cost, but at least you've got a standard dock that's going in these locations. Otherwise you have a mismatch.
Sorry.
Otherwise, you're going to mismatch of docks. And to me, we're going to manage it. Let's manage it correctly.
Right. I agree with Carl. I think as our council mentioned, duty of care, I think most of us have put docks in and out. I know I do it seasonally. It's a tremendous amount of work. It can be very risky as well. I was encouraged by Andrew and his comment with CPC and potential funding. I would certainly go the route of asking for donations. I would like to be consistent with the docks and have town ownership.
And I would also echo that sentiment as well. I agree with Carl's perspective that I'm definitely more of a 2A or 2B, probably more of like the 2B or somewhere in between route where we have docks we know are structurally sound, accessible, and are going to provide that access. Because at the end of the day, I think what we all want is public access to this area of the lake. And if we can facilitate that, I think we're in good shape. And we're providing equitable access for all of the residents. Anybody that can either walk there wheel their kayak. One thing for me that I'm not really comfortable with is the storage of private property on the land. That I'm kind of shying away from. I don't really want to do boat racks on this particular strip of land for the same reason that we didn't over on the field property off of the other side of Lake Shore. And then when it comes to actually letting private abutters mow, I'm less inclined to do that. I'm more of a town managing it responsibly in terms of invasives and maybe seasonal mowing, while also maybe incorporating some paths for people to access, just so we're not having, people stepping on growth. So I guess my approach would be more of letting the land kind of reclaim naturally while being responsibly managed for invasives and access, town-owned docks, and no private property. That's where I kind of stand right now after kind of hashing this around a little bit. Like Carl said before, I just think the licensing gets so complicated. And enforcement is another story. So it's just kind of down a rabbit hole. But that's my perspective.
So Andrew, to put not too fine a point on it then, so here in terms of the upland, your preference would be the town assumes responsibility for the maintenance, and what you're saying there is you would let sort of meadows develop rather than just mow it to green grass, but you would mow it a few times a year to keep it down, keep the vistas, keep the view shed.
Exactly.
Do I understand that right?
Perfect. Yeah. And at the same time, maybe having some kind of, rock pathway, a couple of those, as much access as possible, at the same time, maintaining the view shed and that natural system along the water's edge.
I do think that's an important point that's sort of embedded in these. I've always assumed that whatever kayak and canoe access or dock access we have will have to come with some disturbance down to the shore if we're willing to deal with that. And if we're not willing to deal with that, we'll probably have different issues. But yeah, they're embedded in this is always a little bit of that creating minor access, if nothing else.
I do think if I can just interject with Andrews, that we've had really good success with land stewards. It may be nice to try and at least be open-minded to a collaboration of shore stewards. So if there are people that are, willing to help with some of that vegetation management as well, in addition to the town overseeing that, I'd be keen to develop lake stewards.
Yeah, and you'll see here, there's a bunch of times where I say like invasive species management is still going to be needed, regardless of whether or not we partner with someone to mow the parcel across from there. And that's probably done best in conjunction with Long Lake Neighborhood Association or LCT, or, Judy, you can help too if you want with LCTV. Amber, not Judy. Sorry, Amber. Or some other, local community group.
One thing that hasn't been discussed, okay, great, everybody's all for us controlling everything. But you do recall that our budget was very significantly crimped. We were given more to do with no money. We managed, thankfully, to get the money donated, but what you're talking about, even if the docks are donated, you're still talking about the cost of mowing, the cost of putting the docks in and out every year, 6 or 9 or however many it is that ends up being, the cost of, there are costs here, ongoing costs, ongoing work, ongoing everything that, I just feel like we don't have enough money. We won't get more money. The town has no money. In fact, they're taking more of our money from us. This is, I'm seeing dollar signs here. Dollar signs and Tim work.
No, I understood, Ed, and I think that's a big reason why Karen is here, and I think a big reason why we shouldn't formally vote tonight, but we do need to sort of hone in on the things that we are supportive of, because let's say we are all, I'm going to put words in your mouth here. Let's say we are all supportive of, a couple publicly resourced docks. Then we go to the select board and say, is this what we want? Because it doesn't come for free. And is this the prioritization that you want to use? So.
And is this where we want to put our priorities?
Well, and that I think is another challenging question.
Mm-hmm.
I think to the extent that members of the public have comments, if you want to raise your hands, I think we can probably transition to that phase of this discussion. And then what we're going to do is come back and discuss sort of the scoring that we have after we hear public comment. A reminder, I am going to keep people to 3 minutes. I hate doing that. I'm sorry when I cut you off. It pains me to do it. So
we're going to go ahead and start with Sarah. And Sarah, you can go ahead and talk. We do ask that anyone that does raise their hand, if you can identify yourself as your full name and your address, that would be great. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. Sorry. My name is Sarah Corey. I live at 35 Lakeshore Drive. I just wanted to thank the commission for your somewhat softer approach to this topic. Obviously, we're all very, very passionate about what we abut to, and we take pride in all of the land stewardship that we've maintained since we've all been here. Ed, I do appreciate the suggestion of possibly grandfathering in the docks. Ours is one of the ones that's considered to be in better condition. And I know, Chase, your son's invited over if he wants to come. I mean, we have a great fishing spot. Those little guys are always catching the best fish right off of our dock. One thing that I will bring up, in the past month or so on the Littleton Moms group, which is always happening, somebody did mention the desire for a boat rack or two around the lake. They mentioned, they actually took a picture. I don't remember if it was Hudson or Carlisle, but they were like, wouldn't this be so cool at Long Lake? And so I did invite them to kind of be aware of this conversation that's been ongoing. And so just so you guys know, that is a discussion among the moms at least, but I'm sure anybody. And I think that although we do have a boat ramp, there's not a ton of parking over there. I guess that also brings up the slight lack of parking around the lake in general, but you can't just pull into the parking lot. The Parks and Rec monetizes it in the peak months. So, we want people to use the water, but then they can't park, or they have to pay, or they get ticketed if they don't. So yeah. And again, we would love to keep things kind of status quo. This feels a little bit reactive, as we've all done the same thing for decades now. So we'd love to kind of ease into whatever we're going to do. We don't want this to be a limited access for the public in the next coming months. It's finally getting warmer. We really would appreciate consideration to kind of like ease in, let the town continue to enjoy what we have. It's fine to give us some guidelines, but we haven't had them all these years. So just know that we do care about the land and our lake and our property and our neighbors. So thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks,
Justin?
Sarah. One thing, Sarah, I just want to comment on, to Sarah Corey's comment. Here's probably what Sarah was referring to. We got a public comment on this, and here it is. So that's number one. Second, Sarah, is Jenny, maybe you can weigh in. My understanding is, to the extent that we allowed docks to go in, that would have to go in via a licensing system, and that licensing system, we couldn't preferentially weight it towards people who are grandfathered. Is that, do I understand that right?
That's right.
Okay. So Sarah, Corey, we're going to struggle to sort of reflect that grandfathering in a formal way. Now, if we did docks and there are only 4 docks and there are only 4, applicants, great. But
okay, Dustin, go ahead.
Thank you, Dustin Neal, 17 Lakeshore Drive. I just want to first off, thanks to Chase for putting everything together. Also to Ms. Merrill for mentioning the recreational use statutes. That's something that I asserted would apply, and I'm glad to hear that confirmed, because I think it's the first time we've heard that confirmed since early in these discussions. So thank you for that. Then on to the sort of like keep it simple observation, I want to just remind everybody this has been in place like this for like 20 to 50 years and has had little or no town management. This works very simply as is. I understand why we can't keep it as is, but connecting that idea also to Chase's comment earlier about getting political will lined up with conservation, that's really important. And I know that this group is planning to go to CPC for boardwalk funding for enhanced accessibility in several places around town, while at the same time trying to, air quotes, keep it simple by removing docks and accessibility here. Those things don't really add up that well. So I think there's an important consideration for that. Next is that I like the idea of racks. I've been saying that for years, but racks without docks sort of invites more foot trampling and stuff like that. But absolutely the location of docks is way, way, way better than traipsing all the way over to the beach. Because for someone to get a canoe to the beach, they probably have to put it in their car, stuff like that. The idea is to have either racks or accessible places along the lake where folks up the hill and throughout the Long Lake neighborhood can easily get to access points near their homes, because that's what limits the parking and the other intrusive things that are out there. So I think racks without docks or well-defined spaces aren't the best idea. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Chase.
Sarah, this is Jim Garrity. I'd like to make a comment. I've unmuted myself, if that's all right. And of course, I'm going to make a comment since I am in a butter here, not as a member of the commission, but as a member of the town. Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Thank you. First of all, I would echo the comments from Sarah and Dustin and others of the appreciating the very thoughtful, all the time that's been put in by Chase and everyone, and the thoughtful discussion about the many different considerations here. I just thought I would comment on 2 points that I thought bore maybe a little further reflection. The first is that before the commission thinks about making a final decision here, it seems to me that there is some additional information that could and should be gathered. There have been many comments made about different costs, and those costs are estimable, and the cost of taking some of these steps, I think, should be assessed. And because, of course, it would be town taxpayer money, we should understand what the cost of those various measures would be. And secondly, we should understand what the licensing fees would be and really think about, what licensing fees might be available and how might they compare to cost under some of the different scenarios Chase has laid out, and bring that to bear on making a final decision. The second point I wanted to make was simply that should there be a licensing component, I just want to make a comment that the discussion kind of suggested that a lottery was the only method that was discussed for assigning places, whether it's docks or slips or whatever. And I would just suggest that lottery is not the only method of assigning those. And lotteries, of course, have some significant disadvantages. They could end up with random winners, people who just decide to put their name in, who have no real interest, no responsible interest, and end up with a slip that they don't care for and actually are not good caretakers. The comment was made that we couldn't preferentially waive grandfathering, and I accept that. But I do think there could be a process, and again, council could weigh in on this, maybe not now, but afterwards, on a process that would not be a lottery, but would be a process whereby people would apply for these rights to a dock or a slip and provide a kind of a rationale as to how they would propose to care for it and care for it in the best interest of the lake. And that those rights could be assigned based on the commission's review of those applications rather than a lottery, that might end in a better allocation should we take the licensing right. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Do you want me to speak to that at all?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind to, Jenny, I think to the extent that you have an answer and can clarify, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's actually an interesting point. And I should say, there aren't procurement concerns with a license. So when I'm talking about, doing a lottery or something like that, it's not to comply with procurement laws because a license is not subject to procurement laws. Having said that, you could always follow a procurement process just because you don't have to. So it doesn't actually have to be a lottery. You could do like a request for proposals as well, or an invitation for bids or something, similar to how the town procures services or disposes of, interests in real property. You could go the extra mile and do that. So you could come up with something like that. I don't know that you could do it strictly like applying for a job or apply, but as long as it's open and transparent and fair, I would say that that's fine.
Right. Would still close the door on grandfathering, but might broaden our ability to think about how it would be utilized, right? If someone is going to keep use it once over the summer versus use it all year, those sorts of factors could be weighed. Okay.
Right. If you wanted to put in other considerations into how you would divvy it out, like you said,
sure. Somebody
who wants to use it all summer long, somebody who wants to put in a dock and make it completely available to the public and not use it at all, something like that, right? Those could be more highly advantageous to the town.
But at the end of the day, it's still a license. All we're doing is parsing the way in which we decide to grant the license.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, great. We're going to go ahead and go to Sebastian Klein. As outlined before, we're asking everyone to speak once so that we can stay within our time allotments of 3 minutes. Sebastian, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Sebastian Klein, 2 Dogwood Road. I'd like to join in and thank the Commission for this open dialogue. In the spirit of keeping things simple, which I'm definitely in favor of, especially given how this all started, I just want to add a thought to Ed's concern about budget. And then, Sarah, I love your thought around stewardship. There are neighbors who have put in the work and the care and the financial means to maintain their own access to the lake. And that's certainly value that you guys should consider as well. We would love to get some more guidance and help support. I'd be the first one to volunteer if somebody was to provide guidelines. Even if you end up controlling and overseeing and owning the docks. I think there's multiple neighbors who would love to chip in, help to mow, help to maintain the docks, help to carry the docks in and out to reduce the financial burden on you and on the town. And all we would need is just collaboration and guidance to keep it very similar to how it's been running, just with your participation and your involvement and your ownership in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Chase, back to you.
Okay. So what I'd like to do, folks, is I'm going to share my screen again, and this is going to be a little cumbersome, and I apologize. But I remember to hit share again. There you go. Can you guys see that? What I'd like to do is I'm going to pick on one of you. We're going to sort of run down the options, and just as we go down these, tell me what you would support, what you would oppose, or what you maybe don't have an opinion on. And I'm going to start to tally those up. There's one sheet for docks. You'll note with the docks, would you support it with licenses or without licenses? So maybe you're okay with docks, but you don't want a license for someone to keep a boat there. So that's the only distinction. Then for kayaks, it's simply support or oppose or no opinion. And for upland management, it's simply support or oppose or no opinion. I want to make it really clear for the public record, none of this is binding. This is purely a straw poll. We're trying to understand which way the wind blows. Everyone is 100% free to completely change their mind when we get to the point of a final vote, if for no other reason than a lot of the details aren't fully fleshed out. So before I do that, are there any other thoughts or comments that folks have? If not, I'm just going to jump in and start to call on people.
And Chase, just to be fair, if someone doesn't have at this moment want to make a comment, they certainly have that opportunity as well.
Absolutely, and right, and that's true of both the commissioners, of course, and members of the public. We are still taking public comment. The next step here will be to take this in front of the select board. So there's no shortage of process. Let's see who's first on my list. Ed, you want to kick us off here? And we'll just sort of run down upland management first.
Sure. And I'm more inclined toward number 1 myself.
Okay. Would you support 2 if it was put forward, or do you oppose that?
I'm against 2 primarily because of the added cost.
Okay. So oppose that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And 3, if we had to do something and the abutters were going to do the maintenance, then I guess, if it wasn't 1, I guess 3.
Okay. But your preferred here would be 1?
Yes.
Okay. Kayak and boat storage?
I think I've made it pretty clear, number 1.
Fair enough. I'm a man who likes his process, if nothing else.
No, that's okay.
And then
I'm a little more trouble here. I'm more inclined towards staying with what's already there and nothing. No, don't go buying docks. Don't go putting costs. Don't put processes in place that we're going to have to enforce, so on and so forth. You don't really have that as an option. But
well, it's sort of no new permits for docks on this parcel, right? Like or are you talking about utilizing existing docks?
I'm talking about keeping the 6 we have.
Right.
That people already
That's kind
have.
of where I was going, right? That wasn't one of the options that I thought we discussed.
I'm going to tell you that, and Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, just maintaining the status quo is probably not something town council would recommend. Am I right in that? The status quo being private parties control it, they go put it in, there's no sort of formalized structure to it.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that.
Okay. We can't formalize that. We can't make those licensed, I guess is what it was.
Well, I'll call it a license, and you're licensing the 6 docks that are already there.
Well, then, if what you're saying there, Ed, is sort of maintain the status quo with licenses, that's alternative 4, right? The person, the private party controls the dock. The private party is responsible for putting it in. We still need a license to memorialize it.
Sure. Okay, then we're talking 4B.
Okay. Does that mean you'd also be okay with 4A, or it's all or nothing to you?
I'm not quite
4A
sure.
4A is
difference between
a smaller number of docks than 6.
No. If I'm going to go this way, then I'm basically saying, 4B, keep what it is now. Okay, you want to put the license in place, fine, but
sure.
Otherwise, we're not punishing anyone, we're not excessively helping anyone, and we're minimizing the cost to us.
Okay. Does that mean?
So to clarify, are we minimizing costs to 4B, or who's procuring docks there?
Nobody.
These are the docks that people already own and control.
Okay, so that's the docks that are there, and we put a license on them.
Or they can buy a new dock. I don't know.
That's fine.
Right.
Thank you.
It's up to them.
We would still be putting in a notice of intent and having to get Chapter 91 licenses for those docks on behalf of the private owners.
Yep. But I think that's going to be true in a lot of cases. There's going to be a notice of intent or an RDA here in any case.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ed, do I correctly understand then that you're not comfortable with taking the donation and the town controlling it?
Correct.
Okay. And overall, is your preference no docks, or is your preference status quo?
Status quo.
Okay. Would you be okay with no docks if we just said none at all?
If we said none at all, sure. Yeah, okay. If we don't say keep the ones we have now with a license, then I'd rather there be nothing. I don't want us buying docks, maintaining docks, and all that goes with that.
Okay. Very good. Okay, Kyle, you're up.
Sure. I think I oppose 1.
Okay.
4, I support 2, and I could support 3 if that's the way we decided to go.
Do you have a preference?
2, please.
Okay, thank you. Kayaks?
I oppose 1. And then I could support 2 or 3.
Okay.
Or I would support 2 or 3. I prefer 3 personally.
Okay. And docks and boats.
So I would support, what do I have here? 2B and 4B, I guess, after you kind of clarified some things there.
Okay. So 2B is we have 6 docks and they're fully public. And I should go up here in terms of supporting 4B. Does that mean with or without licenses for the docks? Like, are you okay with boats on them?
Yeah, I believe licenses would be my.
Okay, support with licenses. So you would oppose 2A?
Yeah, I would oppose 2A and 4A. Like Ed said, if we're doing this, we might as well make it accessible as much as we can.
Okay.
And then I don't see the benefit in receiving donations, so yeah, I'd be opposed against 3. Yeah.
Okay, and your preference overall?
4B would be my preference.
Okay. Thanks all for being patient here. Carl, you're up.
Okay.
So vegetation first.
Yeah, I'd oppose that.
Okay.
2 would be my preference.
And if we did management, but the butters controlled it, are you okay with that or you oppose that?
I would oppose that.
Okay. Okay. Kayaks and non-motorized boats stored in the upland?
Without just stored without having any type of kayak racks. I would do number 2. Town acquires and installs racks at select locations.
And that's your preference?
Yes.
Okay. What about 1 and 3? 1 is no storage at all?
No, I think we need some kind of storage. So I would say.
So you would oppose that? It's a little negative.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. I would oppose that, and in 3, I would oppose any type of ground storage.
Okay.
Without racks. Yep.
You guys are making this clear as mud for me here. Okay, Carl, let's see what you got for docks and boats.
I would have the town acquire the new docks. That'd be 2A. I wouldn't support any donations at all. So any of the donations.
Okay, so
I'd be opposed to.
So let's start at the top. Would you be okay if we said no new permits for new docks?
Yes.
Okay. Would you be okay then if we said town controlled docks? Sounded like that was a yes.
Yeah.
Okay. With or without licenses, would you be okay with us giving licenses for boats to sort of be stored there?
I'd be against licenses.
Okay. Whoops, sorry. Yep. Okay, and then you don't like anything associated with the town partnering with someone.
Right, no donations, yes.
Okay. And your preference here overall for docks? Like if you had to pick one, which would you ideally have?
For docks, I'd do it 2A would be
2 docks?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, wait a sec. Let me think about that one for a minute. Time donation to dogs, donations, acquires new dogs. I think are only options 2 or 6 docks, or
take 2 or 6 to being a small number or a larger number.
Okay, I do the smaller number, 2A.
Okay, Michael, you're up. Shoot, did we lose Michael? Nope, we got Michael.
He's muted.
No, Michael's talking on mute again.
There you go.
All right. So I would oppose number 1. And I would support either 2 or 3.
Okay.
My preference would be number 2.
Thank you. Okay. Kayaks?
All right, kayaks, let's see. I would oppose number 1. And I would support 2 or 3. And my preference would be number 2.
And boats and docks.
Boats and docks. All right, let's see. Yeah, I would support number 1. Same as Ed and Carl. Yeah. I'll oppose the ones that are 2 and support the ones that are 6.
Okay.
With licenses.
Am I getting this right?
Yeah, so far. I'm glad it's you and not me.
I'm just grateful that you guys are being patient with me and walking me through what you'd like. And your overall preference, Michael?
Would be the last one.
Yeah. Let's see. Andrew Smarco, you're up.
All right, I'm up. So I would be a proponent of 2 with that kind of hybrid approach of letting areas renaturalize, but to manage them for invasives and from time to time mow them. I foresee maybe highway department, coming by just like they do at Bumblebee Park, off of Harwood Avenue and other areas, just doing that seasonally. Let's see.
So you'd be opposed to just revegetate, essentially rewilding it. You want it to be maintained, even if maybe in a slightly wilder state.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I wouldn't want it just growing up into a mess. No, absolutely.
Yep. And allowing abutters to do the maintenance?
I would oppose that. I would keep that in the town's hands. And at the same time, have volunteers come forward to help maintain as well, to supplement, town staff. I don't see it as being a big burden, maintenance-wise for the town staff, just seasonal. And then the preliminary path construction as well.
Okay. Kayaks?
Let's see. So I would support no storage of kayaks and canoes or any private property.
Okay. And does that mean that you would oppose options 2 and 3 here?
I wouldn't want to see a wreck on the conservation land. If there was somewhere else, I just don't know practically how that would work. If there was some other parcel, but the problem is if we put it too far away, it becomes impractical. Like, why do it at that point?
I'll tell you with this parcel in particular, it's either on the conservation land or it doesn't exist, or it's on private property, I suppose. But no one has stepped forward to volunteer their private property for it.
And I mean, the status quo right now for anyone that doesn't currently have a boat on the property is you have to bring the boat to the shore. You have to wheel it down, walk it down, or put it in your car. So essentially, I want to create access and keep the status quo for storage for the masses, essentially.
Okay, so you don't want racks then on conservation land, so this would be opposed to?
Yeah, I really don't want us to get into the licensing and storage business. I just think it's going to create too much of a burden for Tim and Lauren. I mean, we talk about staff hours, and I mean, we're pretty in over our heads right now with permitting and land management as it is.
Didn't we tell you we're going to run it through the town clerk?
Oh my
took the words right out of my mouth, Chase.
And believe me, I know licensing firsthand, and it's no easy task. So I just don't want the conservation department to get into the fold of having to license and enforcement's another thing. Who's going to patrol these areas to ensure that people aren't storing things where they're not supposed to be, or mooring boats where they're not supposed to be? I mean, that's a huge that alone, that area of licensing would be a huge time drain.
That's going to have to happen regardless of the options, isn't it?
Unless the option is nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, right, but then
there's
you
some,
gotta still have to patrol
there's some
and make sure
headache
people aren't,
here.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta make sure people aren't just leaving their canoes on the shoreline anyway.
Which they are, by the way.
They are now, absolutely. I think it would be a simpler enforcement in this case, though, because, I mean, somebody would have to pick through and say, okay, this boat's got a tag on it, this one doesn't. Or, you know, this private property does and this doesn't. So it's a little more direct and easier to enforce in that instance.
Okay. And then in terms of docks and boats, would you support no new permits for docks? Like just no docks go in? Is that support or oppose?
I would support that. I just think it gets very messy because ultimately choosing who gets to install a new dock versus who doesn't, I just don't see an equitable way to do that. I want access for everybody equally.
Okay. So then that brings us to, if the town controlled the docks, would you be comfortable putting in docks?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
I would support the town purchasing docks just so we know that there's a standard dock out there that has the same accessibility, safety. It's uniform throughout. We know that they're getting put in properly. Ultimately, access is the goal, and I think that's the safest and most responsible way to do it. And I understand there are costs incurred, but we wouldn't be removing them that frequently throughout the year. We're in the town removes docks and brings them in now, so we're in the practice. I mean, that's the park and rec side of things, but ultimately, yeah, I would be a very big proponent of town docks.
And would you be comfortable with any number or just sort of the half dozen that are already there? Essentially 2 or 6. Are you supportive of both or just one, small or large?
In looking at the parcel, I think strategically 3 makes the most sense in my mind. 1 in the center and 1 on each side. And I really think that would create so many access points for the public to be able to, you know, walk a canoe down, drive one down, drop it off. Essentially what they'd have to do right now if they wanted to launch from one of these docks that's, you know, existing. But in this instance, they're launching from a dock that we know is safe, installed properly, and meets our standards.
Sure. And so last question here, just as I sort of hone in on this, would you be okay with issuing licenses for people to keep their boats there? It sounded like you didn't like licenses, and I just want to make sure when you say I'm good with public docks, you mean public docks for access, not public docks for keeping a boat there over the summer.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So I wouldn't be a proponent of that just from the enforcement standpoint and the who do you license versus who do you don't, because ultimately, if we have a swell of people that want licenses to more motorboats on these docks, how do we pick and choose who does and doesn't? And so we wind up with that same equitability problem where if somebody's living on, let's say, Spectacle Pond Road, what if they want to moor a boat at Long Lake? You know, we're only probably going to be able to do 2 or 3 boats per dock. So we're not solving any issues in terms of access for the boats in this instance. It may help a handful of people, but it's not going to help the town equally.
Okay. And then last couple questions. So you don't want anything to do with non-town docks. So donated docks are a no-go for you, and licensed docks, licensing a spot for a private dock is a no-go for you. Do I understand that right?
That would be a no-go for
anything
me.
with a license is not ideal.
That wouldn't be ideal for me. If somebody wanted to donate a brand new amazing dock that met our standards, I'm all for it.
Sure.
But yeah, I just
let's assume it's a used dock.
Okay. Exactly. I think we should have a high bar for, you know, what we're having the public step on. And I get that, you know, liability can be mitigated through different, you know, practices, but ultimately we don't want things to happen, and we want, you know, to have control of the situation.
Okay. I think we got it. So your overall preference is a small number of town-controlled docks that don't have permanent licenses for boats.
Yes. Yep.
Cool. Awesome.
Thank you.
Sarah, you're up.
So to make it easy, I concur with Andrew on the last one. So
okay.
I love the idea of 3 docks. I think 2 is not enough. 6 might be too many. I also love the idea of like a more of a master plan. How many do we do the first year and then the next year? I would be concerned with having boats on these docks. You know, we get these huge rainfalls, boats get swamped, no one's there to kind of drain them out. It limits the access for people to get onto the water from the docks as well. So, and I know for licenses.
Okay.
Jumping back up to the top in regards to vegetation, I do not want to see it go wild. My preference is for kind of like town, but also a hybrid, as I talked about, having kind of like shoreland stewards. So I'm not opposed to either 2 or 3, but my preference is really kind of have the town monitor that.
Okay.
In regards to canoe, I'm concerned for boats being just abandoned. I prefer probably that lottery method where annually on a small scale. And I do agree that, you know, there's not a lot of land. So I would like to start off on a small scale with, you know, potentially 6 boats and then kind of work your way up from there if it's feasible. I do not want ground storage. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think that would be a hot mess.
Okay. So you're supportive in general of racks.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be supportive of doing nothing? Like we just say no boat storage, or
Correct.
would you?
I'd support doing nothing as well.
Okay. And what's your preference? Sounded like your preference here was some racks.
My preference is some racks. Yep. Just
Okay.
to help bring more access in.
Well, what this is illuminating for me is that it makes perfect sense that I couldn't figure out where we were because we're kind of all over the place. But I do see some patterns coming out. For the sake of transparency, let me just populate this. I'm opposed to just blindly revegetating things. I am good with either revegetation approach. All else being equal, and if resources were infinite, I would prefer that the town do it. I don't think that's ultimately where we'll land. But in terms of boat storage, oh, whoops. Sarah, I think.
You have that right, Chase.
Do I have that right? Okay.
What you said was.
Okay. I wouldn't support something that said no storage. I really do think we need it. So in that sense, I'd be good with either kind of storage, but I would much prefer racks. I think they look cleaner. I think they just work better. And even if it creates a little bit of an administrative headache, I think boats especially are easy enough. I mean, I guess I think we should allow some dock stuff. So I probably wouldn't support a motion for no new permits at all.
Yeah, Chase, that's where I go to. You don't have me listed for that.
Oh, sorry about that, Kyle.
But that's where I would be.
If that's the only mistake I made here, we'll be pretty fortunate. I would be supportive with licenses of, you know, town controlled docks. I think the ideal outcome is town controlled. I probably fall in the ideal of a few. Probably not a large number, but I'd support both. I don't think it's a good idea, so I would probably support requesting donations. We're either all in or we're all out. And then here, I would certainly support, I think, a smaller number. It does create equity concerns. We're going to make somebody mad, but I think we're going to make people mad anyway. And I would support the last one, you know, sort of 6 stocks where we essentially put ourselves on a path to private, making them fully public, but this is our stopgap. So I think I covered it all. I think we can be done with this for a little bit. I am deeply appreciative of everyone being patient here. I think I have everything I need, Sarah. What I will do for the sake of the minutes is memorialize this, and we can dump it in the minutes in a few weeks.
Okay. So with that said, I would entertain a motion to close this public hearing. And then with the thought is, would you like to then go forth to create some policy and ask for 2 or 3 commissioners to help with that language, or what would you like to do?
I'm okay closing the public hearing. I mean, I think we've gotten all the public input that we're going to get here.
Mhm.
I would not be comfortable saying we're going to go put a policy together, because I think a lot of these run through select board's input. If they say, hey, I appreciate that you want these things that cost money, but you're never going to get it, then we need that. So I'd be supportive of closing the public hearing. That doesn't mean, though, for members of the public that we won't continue to take written comments.
Correct. Commissioners, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
Sounds
I
good.
agree.
Yeah.
That's good.
If that's the case, do we have someone that would like to entertain that motion, please?
I move that we close the public hearing for future land use of town-owned parcel U12-14-0.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you.
All right, roll call vote. Michael.
Michael Livingston, aye.
Carl.
Carl Melberg, aye.
Chase Gerbeck, aye.
Ed.
Both aye.
Sarah.
Sarah Seward, aye.
Kyle.
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Myself, aye. It's unanimous.
Okay. Chase, you have done the yeoman's work with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chase.
Sorry, it took 5 times longer than it needed to. But
No, all good. I think that was great dialogue, and certainly thanks to all the public that have been really diligent to kind of follow us through this journey. There's been a lot of comments, and hopefully we can work something out together that works out well for everyone. With that said, that completes this agenda and meeting for this evening. It is now 10:11. If I may have a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Oh, God. So moved.
Okay, with that, may I have a second?
Second. All right. Last roll call vote of the night. Michael.
Michael Livingston, aye.
Chase
Gerbeck, aye.
Carl.
Carl Melberg, aye.
Ed.
Ed Fultz, aye.
Sarah.
Sarah Seward, aye.
Kyle.
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Myself, aye. It's unanimous, and we are adjourned.